Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Quitcast. My name is Becca Syme, and we are here today to talk about author success and particularly the idea of what I can accomplish in the future. And I want to give you a framework to think through the way that we talk to ourselves about what we are capable of doing, that will hopefully help some of us to move along in the direction. And I want to get this out of the way because I know I'll forget to mention it at the end of the episode if I don't do it right now, which is that we are doing some book releasing around this concept. We are going to do a Kickstarter for the first 2 books in the series. And what we're doing is a 7 Deadly Skills series. And essentially it is taking activities that we do as writers and trying to break them down into the bedrock or the foundational skills that we need in order to be successful at these things. And in particular, what I'm trying to do is illustrate the ways in which when someone is very successful at this, that they have assimilated or acquired certain skill sets that are probably invisible to them. Some of them come through personality traits, some of them come through experience. And it's important to acknowledge that the way that we talk about success around here often comes across as being very, well, if you don't have this trait, then why even try? Or if you don't have this skill set, then why even try? And I want to do some content to counterbalance some of that. And in particular, to talk about, okay, let's assume that you do want to get better at this thing, whatever it is. We already did a right to market episode. We're doing a market awareness episode. We have a lot of things coming up around this. If I want to get better, but I don't know what to do, how do I proceed around that particular arena? And Crystal and I on the Patreon have been doing some workshops. We particularly did one on AMS optimization that I'll link to here so that you can see that if you'd like to. But we are trying to do some breakdowns of things where if you have tried this in the past and it hasn't worked, here are some likely reasons why it hasn't worked. But this is a foundational concept that we're going to do in this episode first, because I need us to think about the way that we approach things that we don't understand how to do yet and what can commonly happen, and why I think this reframe is really important. And it's one of those things that when I say it out loud to people, like there's a difference between I can't do it and I can't yet do it. When I say that out loud, it seems almost like too mindset-y. It seems too much like, well, if I could just believe that, Becca, then I would already be thinking that way, right? Some of us, all we need is the reminder, hey, I'm thinking about this in a can't way, and I need to think about it in a can't yet way. And this for me is the primary difference when someone has high learner and when they have learned how to assimilate skills really effectively, they approach things with a can't yet mentality more often than not. Not always. It's important to acknowledge that sometimes backstory and trauma and all kinds of things can impact this. But generally speaking, the strength of learner from the Clifton Strengths metric is the familiarity and the engagement with and excitement about things that are learnable. And the fact that something is learnable makes learners approach it as, well, I can learn how to do this. I can figure this out. So they tend to have a much shorter threshold. If we think of the threshold of the door as being the thing you have to step over to get from one room to another, they tend to have a much shorter threshold than people who don't have a dominant learner trait at being able to say, I can't yet do this, but I could do it if I could learn how to do it. And that natural capacity that's always 100% of the time increased by them learning things over and over and over throughout their lifetime. But that natural capacity comes from this skill set, this particular ability that certain people have to frame things in a way that makes it learnable or makes it accomplishable. So I want to try to talk through that skill set today and do a little bit of encouragement for how we can orient ourselves toward things that we don't yet understand how to do. And I want to acknowledge, because again, we do so much alignment work around here, and a lot of what I say are things like, well, if you are X strength, then that means you are really good at Y. And so that makes it an easy decision to do that. And then there are certain strengths, and I'll just use one example. It's really common, for instance, for relators to dislike social media. And the reason that they do is because relators have a high value for authenticity, and they have a high value for vulnerability inside a trust relationship. So they don't like being expected to be vulnerable where trust is not a currency, right? So when you are dominant and relator, you acknowledge naturally, almost intuitively, that social media is not a place that we can trust. There's very little actual truth going on social media. So much of it is curated truth. It's image expectation stuff, right? And very little of that feels authentic to relators. So when you have a relator strength, it's more common that you dislike social media for those reasons. And then all of those different skill chains that exist because of what relators are good at make me consistently give the advice to relators that says it is not likely that you will be extremely successful at something that you hate. It is not likely. It does occasionally happen, but it is very unlikely. So, if what you're looking for is a place to redirect your attention towards, then I have an easy solution for that. So, we usually encourage relators to do things that have gates on them, like subscription services and newsletters, rather than focusing a whole bunch of their time on social media in terms of ways to engage their audience. And then when they do building, like platform building, we encourage things other than social media, unless they want to hire someone else to do it for them that they think is going to be able to build their platform. So that's an example of where I might say to someone, okay, your skill set in this area is not as dominant, and you have a different skill set that's more dominant. So how about we lean into that skill set, which is well and good if that's also aligned with what the writer wants to do. But if the writer wants to be on social media, then we have to talk about this can't versus can't yet mentality, because that's often what's keeping us from acquiring skills that could move us farther down the road. In terms of, if I am a relator and I am not yet good at practicing vulnerability in public, are there ways that I could help myself do social media more effectively, potentially by working against this major trait that I have, or trying to find ways to translate that trait into other actions than the ones that I've previously been using? And can I get better at social media in a way that relators would be good at it? So that's a lot of the advice that we give in terms of let's redirect for alignment. But when you want to actually get better at specific skills, the problem when I am approaching a topic that there are people teaching it who are really excellent at the topic, the problem is that they usually have skill sets that are invisible to them. So they're teaching me how to do things and saying words like just, which is the absolute indicator when someone has an intact skill chain that you do not share with them, or that it's not likely that the entire world shares with them. They use words like just to describe the behavior. Well, just read the data, says the high analytical. Well, just engage with people, says the high woo low relator, right? Like that is the easiest thing in the world for a woo person. It's their currency, engagement. Trust is the relator currency. Those two things are not, they're not always the same. Of course, when you have both of the strengths, that's a different story. But again, just speaking on a binary for a second, if you are primarily good at a set of skills that are rewarded by doing a certain behavior like social media, then you're going to have things that you have learned how to do that you're not even conscious you're doing because you learned them so long ago that or because it seems like intuition to you, or it seems like natural ability. And for you, just talking to someone is a very easy thing. But for other people, it's not as easy. And there's a threshold of action standing between that person and the ability to execute that skill. And so part of what I want to try to do in this mindset shift discussion about how we approach things that we are not yet competent at or not yet good at is, especially as writers, because there's so many complicated skills that are involved in these things, is that the first thing we have to recognize is that there is a threshold there. It is not ever in any situation that it is impossible for you to make progress on a particular skill that you want to get better at. It's never the case. There's always something that you can do, says the high developer. I know, but like a developer is a strength that believes in the potential of individual people so much that they see these really small incremental steps that you can get better at, or that you could take one step in a direction and that makes you have more capacity, right? So it's easier for developers to see the difference between, I use this example a lot when describing developer. The difference between a perfect A and an almost perfect A when I'm teaching someone how to handwrite for the first time. So if I can tell, like, oh, if we just get this arc here a little bit better, so let's practice just that arc, right? And that helps to increase their capacity to make the A. Developers have an easier time seeing those kinds of things because they're conscious of very small degrees of development. So I recognize that this is a trait that I have that not everyone has. And I'm trying to break down some of the things in order to help us, like break down some of the skill chains in order to help some of us have an easier time seeing that threshold as not as big of a problem as we think it is. So the difference between can't and can't yet is the difference between seeing myself as a finite version of myself that will never change versus seeing myself as something that can change, right? Someone that can change. And I always have to acknowledge whenever we talk about anything that approaches growth mindset stuff, that I am not a growth mindset person in the sense of I'm not in that field. That's not how I approach things. I do, because I'm both learner and developer, believe that growth is both good and necessary. I want to see everyone grow in every capacity they want to grow in, but I'm not a growth mindset person in terms of I understand the benefit of fixed thinking and I understand the benefit of bounded set thinking, in addition to understanding the benefit of growth thinking and of limitless thinking and things like that. I think both of them are necessary. Anytime we shift completely from one side of a spectrum to the other side of a spectrum, we're always losing the balance of something. And the balance that the opposition provides is really important. So when I have only bounded set thinking, then we have people who think, well, I am these 5 strengths, and so I can never, ever do anything except these 5 strengths. And I will never, ever be able to get any better at this thing that's in the very bottom of my strengths mix. And that's not true. You absolutely can get better. The whole point of the strengths theory is the reader speeds thing, right? It is, there's a capacity to get better in smaller steps at things you have less natural talent at. And then there's a capacity to get better faster at things that you have a higher degree of natural talent in. So which one would you choose in that moment? And so much of the coaching that we do is around maximizing, right? Because again, that's another one of my strengths, but it's around that better, faster area. No shock that the company is called the Better, Faster Academy, because that was the original right, better, faster concept, that there is an alignment for you that is already maximizable, that if we can lean into that maximizable space, then we can get there. But again, when we swing too far on that side of the pendulum, then we end up in a place that ignores the fact that sometimes we need arithmetic growth and not exponential growth. So this is essentially the segment of the show, I guess, not the segment of the Quitcast, but the segment of the longer Becca show of life that is, hey, let's not forget to also stay grounded in that center where the bounded set is important and the centered set is important, and both provide something really valuable where I can grow in any area, but I'm still asking the question, is it worth me applying myself this much to something that I am not going to ever be as excellent at as I am excellent at other things? Not even to compare yourself to other people. That's never the point. The point is, are there other ways that I could be better spending my time? But when we're in this industry, sometimes relators need to do social media, sometimes, not all. And I'm going to acknowledge upfront, I still think that your intuition is a better indicator of whether you should be doing things that you don't want to do than anything that people tell you you should do. I still do not believe that shoulds are the correct way to orient ourselves to this industry, because I just see so much evidence of people who ignore all of the shoulds and are extremely successful because they're following their intuition. So for me, I still believe that it is not the shoulds that we listen to. It is, what do I want to do? But if I want to approach something, like I use optimization as an example, because it's something that when Crystal brought up the topic for the AMS work workshop that we did on the Patreon last month, I have to admit, I was like, I've heard a million people talk about ads optimization. I've never once understood it, like ever. No matter how many times they try to walk me through what to do, I never really understand why we're doing this, what it is that's going on, how to do the analysis of the data. I never really get it because there's some gaps in my skill chain that I am high in strategic and my brain wants to just jump over those gaps all the time, but I can't because there's a threshold that's keeping me from executing on the optimization. And that threshold is my understanding of AMS ads because it turns out once I close that skill gap with this workshop and I understood what it was that I was supposed to understand and what the purpose of doing this optimization was and what the ecosystem of Amazon is like and why we do this and what happened, like all these things. All of a sudden I was like, oh, I get this now. I understand. And you limited it because this is the other thing she did in the workshop that I think was so brilliant for what writers actually need is that she limited it just to the one step that we're on. So instead of trying to understand the entire trajectory of every single thing that we will ever do in the optimizations phase about AMS, it was just limited to why are we here? What is going on here? Let's go through all of these different pieces and how they fit together. She gave us the context, right? She's high context in the strengths. And then we only talked about the first step and we talked about it in depth and we all asked all of our questions and we had this. It was an amazing experience from a developer perspective because I feel a whole bunch of us suddenly able to cross the threshold into executing on AMS optimization. And I would have said before, in fact, I'm fairly certain I've said it on this actual podcast. If I haven't said it, I have said it in other places, like on the Patreon. I've said, I don't understand how to do ads optimization. So I just have these auto ads that have been running for like, whatever, 10 years. And then I keep trying different AMS strategies and they just keep not working for me. And I've never really understood how to do them. All of a sudden, the threshold goes down for me. And now I'm doing AMS optimization, which feels so strange because I would have said like, oh, I'm just going to intuitively read my ads. Like and in fact, we did a whole course several years ago about intuitive ad running where we were trying to teach our intuition how to run ads by running ads with Crystal and being able to ask her questions. And I did learn a lot, mostly about Facebook ads though, but I did learn a lot about honing my intuition because at that point I needed to close the skill gap of understanding ads as a general rule. Like it wasn't just the understanding of Facebook, it was understanding ads and audiences and delivery and all these things. Like there's a lot of understanding I need to do because of the strengths that I have. So that's often a threshold for me between can't and can't yet, is that when I don't understand something, and any of you who are high in intellection, context, strategic learner may also have this same need for understanding, which is for me, before I can take action, I often need to be able to understand all the perspective of something. So I have to be able to think all the way around a particular philosophy or thought or ads platform or ecosystem or something like that, where I can understand it completely and then I know what action to take. So if I can't figure that out, that's the first step in my like threshold of can't yet. Now that I know that about myself, which I learned from a strengths perspective long ago, but now I know that about myself, I'm always looking for how do I figure this out? How do I understand it from more perspectives and get more information? And for many of us who have that desire to do something, like we have a will, we talked about will versus wish in one of the last Quitcast episodes. So we have a high desire to do it. I have a want or a will, but I don't have the can't yet attitude because I'm still overwhelmed by what I don't know. And this is where the difference between can't and can't yet, I really need to understand what it is about me that will make me shift to that place. For some of us, the difference is, and I'm going to go through a couple of these so that you'll hopefully be able to hear yourself. I talked about understanding a little bit. Sometimes that is the necessary step. We have to understand the breadth of something. For some of us, it is that I need to be so motivated to do it that I will force myself through the learning curve no matter what it takes. And that drive, that motivation to accomplish is often something that if I can't see the benefit of it for me, or I can't see that it's necessary, or I can't see that there will be the outcome that I want from doing it, then it can make me not want to even start learning because I can't see the benefit. So that drive kicks in once I can see that it will be beneficial for me. And other people can wax eloquent about it and tell me what should happen, etc. But when I'm wired this way, the motivation is very specifically me being able to see how it will fit in. For some of us, the difference between can't and can't yet is we don't know what the next step of the learning curve is at all. Like we can't even conceive of what to do next. All we know is when we take a course or read a book, we don't know what it is that we don't know. Why is this not clicking? And for me, when you are advanced enough in this industry that you are no longer taking introductory courses, you are no longer reading introductory books, you need community or coaching or consulting from someone who knows it well enough that they can ask you questions about your knowledge and figure out what it is that you don't understand yet, or they can watch your execution. Because oftentimes teachers with high strategic or high learner, if they are wired to watch what you don't know instead of to just teach you the system that they know works for them. So it depends on their drive, right, as well. But if you're talking to somebody who is driven to help you close the gap in whatever it is that is not working for you, then you're more likely, when you're not in that 101 level anymore, you are more likely to need to talk to someone who can hear what it is that is not working for you. This is one of the reasons that I'm such a huge fan of things like therapy and coaching and consulting, because when you talk to someone who's an expert, they understand it on a different level than most people will ever understand it, especially because there are an awful lot of people teaching things where their understanding is still very rudimentary. So they don't have enough complicated knowledge of the subject to be able to give you answers beyond that 101 level that they understand. So when you see somebody who's really excellent at something, like I still remember this so vividly. There's a strength called discipline, and it is about the ability to kind of see and understand structure and have guidelines and boundaries, and to understand taking action by knowing sort of what's expected and being able to replicate it. And so there's this function that discipline has where being able to see and apply structure is like a high level talent. Right. And I was talking to somebody who had high discipline about trope architecture and about how when you have this particular type of architecture, but it isn't always applied to, let's say, like rom-com as a genre, then you're always going to be stuck replicating this architecture, needing these two particular types of characters in order to make it work, because we've always seen the story done that way. And we don't understand that there are other elements you can substitute out as long as you keep the stakes the same. So we were discussing this, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, where you have a very unusual fake dating scenario, because usually fake dating stakes are based on family responsibility, societal position, or what I would call like badness, right? Where I did something bad and I need someone to help me compensate for that, or I did something that I perceive to be as bad, but there's some kind of, there's a societal pressure externally, and there usually are parents or family or like society as a whole, right? When you have like royalty or something like that involved in the fake dating scenario. But How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days took this structure with the right stakes of fake dating and replaced all of the elements in it so that you had this one particular personality type, which is, I can't tell if he's a swashbuckler or a charmer, but he's one of the two, where you had that personality type that is usually very focused on fun and excitement and sort of titillation, right? That is not typically a person that those stakes would work for, because they would not care as much about what people thought about them. But you put them in a situation where all of a sudden their job is on the line, their ability to pay for them, their life is on the line, their ability to have more acumen in their workplace is on the line, or to have forward mobility mobility, and all of a sudden fake dating works for them because the structure of those states had enough form and function that it worked even with a personality you wouldn't see it for. And I still remember having this conversation with them where their eyes sort of lit up and they were like, oh, this could happen and this and this and this and this, because they can see that structure and function underneath that trope and the architecture there. And I was like, yes, this is, and we got to kind of nerd out about it a little bit, but it was because their baseline skills were so significant in that arena that it helped us have a conversation that I couldn't have had with other people because they didn't have that refined understanding, that expertise. And it reminded me of why excellence is so important to identify and why it's important that we have people in the industry or in any industry who are extremely excellent at certain things, because the capacity that people have when they have expertise to be able to orient people and explain things and hear gap and be able to shift perspectives. It's so, they've just seen so much. They've understood so much that they don't have to struggle with 101 level questions, and they can get above those. And again, this is not to say 101 is not important, but there are so many areas where when you can't see the next step, what you actually need is someone who's so far beyond the step that they can look at the trajectory that you're on and hear, oh yeah, you are this and you need that, and here's your next step. So when you can't see the next step, so often you go looking for courses and books and workshops, and what you should be going looking for is coaching and consulting, and very specifically with someone who has enough expertise in the thing. Sometimes you can talk to just a developer, learner, strategic, arranger, like some combination of those. Sometimes restorative can get in that mix too and help with that. But when you have people who are talented enough at seeing those skill chains in general, who can listen to you talk and understand, oh, you don't understand the rule of three, or oh, you don't understand stakes. That's what's going on here. And I do a lot of this in coaching with people where we'll be talking about like, oh, I'm stuck, I need to be more productive, etc. And I'll say, okay, try this and this based on, their personality and what's likely happening in their writing routines and stuff like that. And then I'm like, but let's talk about the book for a second, because especially if they haven't completed a lot of books in the past, but I'll say, hey, let's talk about the book for a second so that I can hear, is there something you're missing about the development of the story that you may not realize that you have missed because you're so used to intuition working in a certain way? And then we'll talk through different elements, just because like there are certain things I'll say, if you are an intuitive writer, often, if you're a character driven writer and a discovery drafter, often you'll have to do rewrites at a certain point of the book because you get to know the character well enough now that you know their trajectory, and you need to go back and take what you've learned and apply it to the early part of the book in order for it to make sense, a cohesive narrative, right, as a trajectory. And not everybody knows that about themselves, even though they have done it multiple times. Not everyone who's wired that way understands this is going to happen to me every time because it's happening for a good reason. So I'll look for some of those patterns when I'm coaching people, trying to help, like, okay, if we expect you to be like this, it will be easier and faster if you do this thing, like the rereading and rewriting, instead of trying to move forward from here. Because even though you want to make forward progress, it's actually going to be better for you. And I'm going to do a quick cast on this as well, but on how to understand how to make progress, because this can't versus can't yet. I'm trying to break down some of these things that are common problems where I see a lot of people who have these thresholds of like, hey, I want to make progress, but there's something about myself I don't understand yet. So I'm trying to pick some of those out and we'll make some content about them. And again, this is why perspective of experts is so important, but a specific type of perspective. It has to be from someone who's willing to listen to you or who's willing to talk through your process. And what I would suggest, if you're hitting this space with a particular subject, is I would book some time with someone who's an expert in it and ask them questions about a project that you're working on, and ask them to ask you questions about things that it sounds like you may not be making forward progress on. So when I listen to people talk about things like social media marketing or running a Kickstarter or doing direct sales, et cetera, often what I'm hearing are skill gaps. It's not that there isn't good information out there about how to execute. It's that I'm missing a skill that everybody else who's teaching about it has, and I can't hear it because I don't have it. So I need someone who has perspective. And oftentimes, this is what you'll get from being in like groups or Discord servers or something with a whole bunch of other authors, is you'll have other people saying, oh yeah, all of a sudden direct sales made sense to me when I learned X. Or, oh boy, all of a sudden optimization learned for me when I learned this. And it's because you share a skill gap with multiple other people. So it can be really beneficial. This is also why I love the podcasts that Jamie Albright and Sarah Rosette do so much, because you're hearing people talk about the thing that was missing for them, the thing that they wish they had known early in their career, the thing that got in the way that now they fixed and now it's doing better. So I really love that podcast in particular because it helps people who have skill gaps in certain areas hear someone else who also has a similar skill gap, who's figured something out now later in their career and can talk backwards to the people who are still there. And I think it's super beneficial to have some kind of perspective to help you fix and change that threshold that you have where you're wanting to take action, but you're getting overwhelmed, or you're wanting to take action, but it feels like you've tried everything and nothing has worked. So this particular series that we're going to do, I'm going to do a bunch of 7 deadly skills stuff. And what's likely going to happen is I'm probably going to do some interviews with some people trying to illustrate some of the skill gaps. And then I will do follow-up stuff about the 7 skills. And then I'm also going to write some books. And I don't know how many we're going to do, but this feels like a really big project for me because it's something that I do in coaching a lot. An awful lot of my coaching appointments are, if they're not strengths alignment in particular, it's let me listen to you talk about this thing that you're struggling with and see if I can hear the skill gap that's there and give you a fix for it. So part of what I want to do over the course of the next several months is to refine some of these things into some actionable takeaways for those of us who are struggling. Because it's very hard for me without doing one-on-one coaching with an individual person to just be like, oh, here's all the possible skills that you will ever need to do anything. But it's very easy for me to say, here are the skills that are commonly missing in people who've tried to do this and haven't been able to. Here are the skills that I commonly have to send people to find, and here's where I usually have to send them to find these things, which is why I suggested the AMS optimization workshop. And we're doing one on platform building, and we're doing one on packaging and on blurb writing, because I think having these opportunities to really dig into somebody like Crystal, who has a number one context, understands more about some of these marketing concepts than most people ever will. Even some of the people who teach them, not because she knows more, let's say, practically. It's because the way her context understands things, she goes looking for these holes to fix in herself. She understands when she doesn't fully know something, she goes looking for it. And I see her do this when she's learning new things. It's like the hoovering that happens is almost input like, which is really interesting because her input is not very high. But she does this in a way where she's specifically trying to fill in the gaps in her understanding, because her context wants to just be able to replicate patterns over and over again. In order to do that, it needs to know kind of the full breadth of how things work. So my goal in doing some of these interviews and workshops and Quitcast episodes and things like that is to try to illustrate some of these skill gaps. And so here's what I want to encourage you to do in this can't versus can't yet thought, right? Like in this modality that we're entering. I want you to think about the thing that you really would like to do that you just haven't been able to do. And I want you to think about all of the different courses and workshops and things that you have taken, and think about the justs that you hear. So what is it that someone says? Like, I used to hear this a lot in Facebook ads courses that will just make graphics. And I'm like, I don't understand how to do that though. Like I'm not a graphics person. So I had to learn how to do that. And I had to get over the threshold of I'm not an artistic. So I don't think that I have a good eye for things. I can't draw and I can't paint. So I feel like I'm not the right person to be, and I don't like graphic art and I don't like all these things. So like, I'm not the person to be doing this. But when I realized that that wasn't actually helping me, that I didn't need to be the world's most excellent graphic designer in order to make my graphics for my Facebook ads, all of a sudden it was like, oh, now I can lower the threshold of action for myself because it turns out I don't have to maximize everything. Who knew? Some things are not, maximization is not required. I did not know that. But because again, I knew that I needed to learn how to do that. I heard the just often enough that I was like, I am not a graphics person, so I need to figure out how to do this. So I asked Crystal a million questions and tried to figure out how to do it better. And things like BookBrush, right, provide a really good stopgap for people like me who just are not great at making graphics. So there are tools out there that can help to fill the skill gaps as well. So part of the just looking, like I want you to think about what justs have you heard in this area, and I want you to put them in the comments on the YouTube video for this episode 18 of season 7, I think it's going to be. I want you to put them in the comments because I want to try to get more and more and more opportunity to make content about this. And you will help me by helping me come up with more topics and more justs and more shoulds. Because typically it's the justs that are the issue here. Just do this is the issue. So let's think about this together. In the meantime, go looking for an opportunity to make one step of progress. Even if all you do is make one video or do one graphic or make one ad or do one thing, even if all you do is write one sentence or try one step of progress today on anything that's in front of you. And if all else fails, leave the video and go open the manuscript because that might be the one step that you need to take today. All right. I'm so excited for this content. Please do follow the Kickstarter. If the Kickstarter is done when you're listening to this in 2020, whatever, then hopefully the book will be available for you to purchase. But if not, please follow the Kickstarter. I'm very excited to be producing this content. We have some really fun stuff that's planned for this, and I hope that we can be helpful. So thank you so much for listening to the Quitcast. We'll see you next time, everybody. Bye.